This video is now in session, and officially, the CDC moratorium on evictions for renters has ended. So that eviction moratorium stated that landlords could not evict people who could not pay their rent because of the public health crisis surrounding COVID-19, and that was extended all the way to July 31st, and there would be a sunset clause on July 31st, meaning that unless if the CDC moratorium is extended, the moratorium would no longer be in effect. And now is August 4th. August 4th, meaning that the eviction moratorium has ended for 4 days, and it doesn't seem like anything is going to be done to extend it. Now, originally, it wasn't supposed to be such a big problem since COVID cases in June were down at a very low rate of 15,000 to 4,000. But then ever since July, it started increasing again, and now it is up to a high of 135,811 cases, which is a lot of cases when you compare it to the first and second wave. So with that, we're seeing a resurgence of COVID, and we're seeing generally a time of a little bit of increase in instability with the economy. The economy could very well go down now that we have the Delta variant taking over the majority of cases. And with that, people might not actually be able to pay rent anymore. Once again, because the cases are rising, and a lot of people are starting to fear for their safety. So with that, it would be sensible to extend the eviction moratorium. Now, obviously, there are reasons why you shouldn't, even when cases are really high. But nonetheless, Democrats are kind of blaming everyone, and I guess for the same for the Republicans for that matter. Everyone at this point is blaming everyone. Everyone is blaming everyone on the eviction moratorium and how it's not being extended. The House Democrats, especially the progressive Democrats, are blaming Biden for not extending the eviction moratorium. Meanwhile, Biden is blaming Congress for not doing their job, and the Republicans are blaming Democrats for their lack of leadership on this issue. So whose fault really is it? I mean, it's not the most important thing, because ultimately right now, there's an eviction crisis that will happen, and blaming people is not going to do anything about it. But if you really want to know who to blame, we have to take a look at all of the context. So AOC is arguing that Biden has the power to extend the eviction moratorium, and that it's not necessarily the Republican Party that's at fault because the Democrats have a majority in the House. Meanwhile, Biden is saying that it is Congress's job to extend the CDC moratorium because they don't have the power to extend the moratorium themselves. And the House Democrats, they're arguing that the Senate GOP, is blocking any chances of getting a moratorium passed in Congress, extending it, because they don't want to do so. And for this kind of legislation, you need 60 votes in the Senate to overcome the filibuster, and there are definitely not 10 Republican senators that would be willing to extend the eviction moratorium. So with that, who is to blame? Well, let's look at the entire context. There's more to bring up in the form of a Supreme Court case in Alabama Association of Realtors versus the Department of Health and Human Services. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that the eviction moratorium was constitutional, but at the same time, they said that, or at least Brett Kavanaugh indicated that for it to be extended, that Congress has the sole authority to do so, and that the president does not have any powers to extend the moratorium by himself. So with that, it seems clear that Biden doesn't really have any powers. Now, he did say originally that he did not want to extend the eviction moratorium, and as a result, he didn't want to extend the eviction moratorium, and as a result, that could play into what AOC is saying, but nonetheless, it's still the Congress's job as a legislative branch and not the executive branch, because the executive branch is not supposed to make or extend legislation. The legislative branch is supposed to do that, and Biden is supposed to sign that into law. Essentially, who to blame? It's mainly Congress for not doing anything. I mean, Congress had a long time to work on this. Even when COVID cases started going up, they started going up 1 month ago, around the start of July. So they still had a very long time to figure out what to do about the eviction moratorium. And the Congress has shown that they're still able to get stuff done, even if it is on like the brink of deadline, like the stimulus checks, the $1,400 stimulus checks that were passed under the 116th Congress in when the deadline was nearing for the original stimulus checks that were given out in March and April. So with that, Congress has shown that it can use limited time to get stuff passed. So they had a month to get this eviction moratorium done and to extend it, but they've only really started to concentrate it on it like 3 days ago, which obviously is not enough time to get anything done. So, yeah, it's just the ineptitude of Congress. They obviously the July 31st sunset clause was pretty obvious, but was still relatively ignored by House Democrats. And now people are going to face eviction. 11 million people are at risk of facing eviction. Oh, the investigation came out. Okay, no, we'll talk. By the time this video has released, I'll probably already have a video outlining the sexual harassment investigation by Letitia James. But concentrating on this, 11 million people are at risk of losing their rent, and it's not necessarily the landlord's fault because of this. In the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of people asking landlords to stop rents and to freeze rental payments so that people could actually recover. But the thing is, landlords are not necessarily at fault. Obviously, there are landlords who are really are a douchebag and are really bad, but for the most part, landlords are not to blame for evicting individuals because landlords have to use that money that they get from renters in order to pay taxes, in order to pay subsidies and for maintenance, and as well as for taxes to the state and federal government. So as a result, they need to use that money, and they need to get that money somewhere. They can't get it from their own pocket because landlords don't actually make that much money, but instead, they have to get it from the renters. But then the renters are screwed. It's either the landlords or the renters who are screwed. So the solution to this is involves the state. The state collects the most taxes from landlords, and they could use the relief that they got from the American Rescue Plan and from the billions of dollars that the government gave to states for assistance to apply that to rental assistance and make sure that landlords don't have to pay so much money to the state, so that landlords don't actually have to keep charging renters amounts that they can't pay. So if they give money to landlords and to renters, then it's up to the state to do that because they have excess money. California has shown that they have $700 billion in a surplus, and New York as well as New Jersey has also shown they have a surplus in their state budget. So they can certainly do a rental assistance bill, and that is the clearest solution right now to get this issue fixed. Congress at this point has shown that they can't do anything about this because all of the negotiations have failed. The executive branch has shown that they can't do it because it's unconstitutional for them to do it. So now it's up to the states to carry on with helping this issue. But it's also a symptom. It's also a symptom of the larger problem of the housing market and how it has advanced since 2008, since the 2008 recession, where we saw Wall Street invest in a lot of homes and turn them into rental houses. And for that, we will talk about that in a separate video in part 2, which will be tomorrow, because of how big that issue, that entire scope of the housing crisis is, since it has been happening since 2008, and we're seeing a lot of the repercussions go all the way through this pandemic. So that will be in part 2, which will be tomorrow. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.